Hello, this is Will, and in this lesson, I will be showing you how to enable HTTP health checks. So let's just stop for a second and talk about what exactly we're doing in this particular lesson. In the original Kubernetes the Hard Way guide created by Kelsey Hightower, he used a Google Cloud Platform load balancer, and that load balancer needs to be able to perform health checks against the Kubernetes API to measure the health status of API nodes. So if you think about a load balancer, it needs to know which nodes are up, which ones are healthy, which ones are functioning properly, so that it can avoid sending traffic to nodes that are unhealthy, and it performs regular health checks on a schedule to determine which nodes are healthy and which ones are unhealthy. However, the GCP load balancer that Kelsey Hightower uses cannot easily perform health checks over HTTPS. So this guide instructs us to set up a proxy server to allow the health checks to be performed over HTTP. So the GCP load balancer cannot easily do the health checks over HTTPS, but the Kubernetes API only serves HTTPS. So to get around that limitation, Kelsey Hightower created an Nginx proxy server on each control node that would proxy those health check endpoints, and it would only proxy that single endpoint to allow those health checks to be performed over HTTP. Now, we are not using a Google Cloud Platform load balancer because GCP is not our underlying infrastructure in this course. We're going to be using an Nginx load balancer, and Nginx is actually capable of determining the health of various nodes without the need for us to proxy those health checks to HTTP. So we don't actually need to do this step. And in fact, if you want to completely skip this step and just go on to the next lesson, feel free to do so because it won't affect anything else that we're going to do later in the course. However, one of the things that I want to do in this course is provide enough information to help you understand what was originally going on in Kelsey Hightower's guide and why he included that step. So just to maintain consistency and just to give you an idea of how we can implement those health checks in case you are in a situation in the future where you need to do so, we're going to go ahead and do that step in this lesson, even though with our architecture, we don't actually strictly need to do it. So I'm logged into my two cloud servers, and I'm just going to do a real quick curl-k https:// localhost 6443/healthz. And as you can see, it just returned OK for both servers. This is the actual health endpoint that we're going to be proxying. So if I change this request and change it to HTTP, it's not going to work. It didn't return anything. And what we want to do is we want to create a proxy so that there's a way to reach this endpoint over HTTP, and we'll just create a basic Nginx server to allow us to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen, and I'm going to begin by installing Nginx with just a sudo apt-get-y install Nginx. Now that I've installed Nginx on both servers, I'm going to create a configuration file. And this configuration file is going to define all the settings we need in order to create our proxy. And of course, you can find this command in the description to this video so that you can create this file as well. And this file is just going to be called kubernetes.default.service.cluster.local. That's the file name right there. And here's the contents of the file. And all we're doing is we're instructing Nginx to listen on port 80, and we're providing that with a server name. And we're going to proxy the traffic on port 80 specifically when it matches this /healthz endpoint. So we're not exposing any other endpoints in the Kubernetes API, just that one endpoint. And we're using proxy pass to proxy that to the actual address with the full HTTPS. And there's our local host IP address, 6443/healthz. And then, of course, we're passing in the trusted certificate that is being used so that Nginx will not throw an error because it doesn't trust the certificate from that server. So I'm going to go ahead and create that config file. And now we need to move that file into the proper location. So I'm going to do a sudo mv on that file, which is kubernetes.default.service.cluster.local. And I'm going to move that file into etc/nginx/sites-available. And I'll keep the file name the same, kubernetes.default.service.cluster.local. And this is just kind of a standard that a lot of people use in order to manage Nginx configurations. We don't necessarily have to do it, but we're going to do it for the purpose of this course. We're just going to adhere to that standard. And the standard is that we put configuration files in this location called sites available. And when we want Nginx to actually pick up that configuration and see that configuration, what we do is we create a symlink. So I'm going to do sudo ln-s, and we're going to create a symlink, and it's going to link to that file that we just moved into place, which is at sites available, kubernetes.default.service.cluster.local, and we're going to put that symlink into etc/nginx/sites-enable. This is just a standard that Nginx uses. We put the config file in sites available, and when we want to activate that configuration, we put a symlink in sites enabled right here. And the reason people use that standard is it allows us to easily enable and disable different configurations just by adding and removing these symlinks. So now I've created that symlink, and to make sure that Nginx picks up those changes, I'm just going to restart it. And I'm also going to enable Nginx to make sure that it starts up automatically when this server starts. So now I've set up my Nginx proxy, and I'm going to go ahead and test it just to make sure that everything is up and running. And you can find this command in the description as well. I'm just doing a curl command, and I'm passing in this header to indicate the host. And my curl command is HTTP, not HTTPS, to 127.0.0.1. That's that default localhost address. And I'm not defining a port. So I'm actually hitting port 80 because if I do HTTP, the default port is port 80. And because I'm not defining a port, it's going to assume port 80, which of course matches the listen port that we defined earlier. So that's the port that we want to hit. And then I'm hitting /healthz. And sure enough, I got a response. It's 200 OK on both servers. And of course, here's the actual body of the response right here. I got an OK message. So that indicates that I was successfully able to reach that health endpoint using my HTTP proxy that I set up through Nginx.